Good morning, good afternoon. Mark Levy. I work in the product marketing group here at Micro Focus. And today we're going to talk about enterprise DevOps, the road to the digitally enabled enterprise. Like many of you, I've had several different jobs in my career. If you look back, I actually started out in ops. I was a sysadmin for several years, and then I moved over to the product development organization, was a lead developer for about 10 years. And then moved over into the business side and spent a good part of my career in product management and product marketing. And I formerly came from Serena Software, which was acquired by Micro Focus in 2016. And starting in 2008, I began to focus almost exclusively on how large enterprises delivered software. I was leading an effort to create a new solution, and I teamed up with my lead architect, and we went and visited several of our largest customers, both in Europe and in the US, and we spent weeks on site working with release teams to understand how companies delivered software. And what we found was incredibly complex and fragile systems managed by very talented and hardworking teams, putting in long hours, and major heroics to deliver software, right? Teams were using Microsoft Excel and Word to manage this complex system. And unfortunately, changing the system was fraught with danger. Every release was like a new experience, and not in a good way. And the general attitude was that, we would only release when we have to, because the pain of releasing was extremely high. Even back then in 2008, the pressure was building and the cracks in the system were being exposed. You see, software delivery has always been a race against time. I was a developer for 10 years and we were always racing to a date. But over the last several years, or perhaps the last decade, the pace has accelerated dramatically. These events have really helped dramatically reshape the business landscape. Starting in 2004, you had Salesforce.com IPO, built off really the backs of the old ASPs and the MSPs on the .com generation, but Salesforce.com really showed that SaaS works both as a technology and as a business model. And then in 2006, Amazon introduced AWS, right, the first public cloud platform, and provided really this new technology and platform that a lot of the sort of the DevOps unicorns leveraged to create, digital disruptions, right? Then in 2007, really the first truly successful smartphone was launched. And you really have to visualize, a world that is happening very quickly, where 80% or so of the adult population on the planet has a mobile device that's supported with it's really a supercomputer connected with, near infinite capacity to a huge pool of computing power in the cloud. And the applications on top of that infrastructure are incredibly powerful. And so you start to see organizations focus on really the importance of software as innovation. And this idea that business innovation and software innovation are becoming one and the same. And it's really no wonder that software delivery teams around that same time, a little later, were being pushed to deliver faster as the digital transformation occurred. And we see that, 2 years later at Velocity, John Ospal had that presentation of 10 deploys per day. And the first DevOps days was held in Ghent, Belgium, with Patrick Dubois and team. And so we see, and I just wanted to see that, DevOps is not something that is a coincidence. It was driven really by this digital transformation, the need for speed. And this digital business really is changing. This is a quote from Gartner, and it said it will change. It is changing the business and economic models of every industry. We see that Amazon's recent acquisition of Whole Foods is an example of an aggressive digital disruption. So the digital barbarians are at the gate, and industry-leading companies that don't embrace the digital business will lose out to traditional competitors or new competitors from other sectors. So faced with this digital disruption, organizations must innovate to compete and potentially survive. But this pressure to innovate has really exposed cultural and technical barriers. And that's what we want to talk about today, because DevOps breaks down barriers. DevOps is really a transformative state that you really continuously move towards by implementing a culture of continuous improvement and by doing many different cultural and technical practices. Now, DevOps lets IT deliver business value faster. How fast? Well, the latest State of the DevOps report in 2017 says that by leveraging DevOps practices, organizations have been able to go from monthly deployments to several times a day. They're able to reduce their lead times from days to minutes. And IT organizations that leverage DevOps practices are quite a bit more agile. Now, why is agility important to IT? Accelerating software delivery by reducing lead times really is a force multiplier because it enables faster business decisions. Jeff Bezos, in his latest letter to shareholders, discussed this concept. The concept was high velocity decision making. It's an actual practice that they use at Amazon. And Bezos actually calls out the enterprises in his letter to shareholders. And he says, look, the enterprises make high quality decisions, but they make high quality decisions slowly. And he goes on to make the case that speed matters in business. Most decisions at Amazon are made within somewhere around 70% of the information that you wish you had. Whereas if you wait for 90%, as Bezos contends, which most enterprises do, in most cases, you're probably too late to the party. You missed the boat. Plus, either way, you need to be good at quickly recognizing and correcting bad decisions. This is key. This is key of the importance of agility. The future in the business world is not always clear. And the field is always changing. The competitive field in the marketplace is always changing. So it's not a straight line to success. If you're really good at course correcting, being wrong is a lot less costly than you think. Whereas being slow is going to be expensive for sure. So you might be saying that, well, we don't really need to deploy 15 times a day. Maybe your company or your market segment really isn't, or your business isn't really driving you for that requirement. But really with DevOps and automation, push button deploys, delivers change in a way that is consistent and repeatable. And that's key. It's on demand. It becomes a non-event, right? It is far less expensive and allows your technical resources to focus on creating customer value. So you're making delivering software frictionless. Now, not only is DevOps more agile, but it's more reliable and secure. Speed and quality don't have to be mutually exclusive. It's not about balance. It's about getting both. You need both speed and quality. And this is why bimodal is really not an end state, but that is really for another talk, right? So IT organizations using DevOps practices on an average, according to this survey, has 5 times lower change failure rates. And they spend 50% less time remediating security issues. Now, DevOps has been proven to increase speed and quality. And these DevOps principles and practices were originally developed by leading edge web scale Silicon Valley companies. Now, taking DevOps for the enterprise is the same principles, but a whole new challenge, okay? Large enterprises have many different attributes that are different from these early digital disruptors. In large enterprises, there's hundreds of applications, geographically dispersed teams, both mainframes and distributed environments, loosely and tightly coupled architectures, in highly regulated environments and different development methodologies, and a complex multi-platform architecture. Now, each enterprise has its own, in some ways, unique DNA, full of complexity, sophistication, and chaos. In fact, in some ways, every enterprise is a snowflake. So where do you start? How do you start your DevOps journey? You have to start by asking, why do DevOps? Make sure everyone understands what are the business objectives to support your DevOps journey. Objectives vary, but let's say, for example, your objective is to free up capacity for innovation and not be a bottleneck to the business. The business objectives and measured outcomes drives your enterprise DevOps transformation and not the other way around. A lot of people think that, hey, if we just implement speed and quality, the business will take off. That's not true. You have to have a good set of objectives and metrics to measure those outcomes, not just outputs, but outcomes, in order to drive your enterprise DevOps transformation. Now, once you have your business objectives understood, then you can next start looking at creating a process to embrace change across your organization and create this culture of continuous improvement. Now, change is hard. You need executive backing for this. Executives need to work with their management team to lead this process, because really only the management team in a lot of ways can align the resources within the organization to drive the level of transformation that is required. Management also has to have an end-to-end view of the value chain, and they are best positioned to bring all the resources of the organization to bear on this common plan. You also have to be willing to change the system of work. I really like this Deming quote. A bad person will beat a good person every time. You know, if it takes you 3 or 4 weeks to change your website, you know, that is not promoting a culture of change. Anybody wanting to change a culture needs to really define the actions and behaviors they desire, then design the work processes that are necessary to reinforce those behaviors. So if continuous improvement and change is desired, and you have to ensure that the system is designed to encourage that. Like if your ops team is measured by only mitigating risk, and your dev team is only measured by delivering change, we have a conflict. You have to resolve that. So you need to be willing to change the system. Otherwise, you'll have a tremendous headwind on your DevOps initiative. Okay, now we've discussed business objectives and we've talked briefly about the culture of continuous improvement. As part of changing the system, we need to look at the technical practices as well. We need to look at the deployment pipeline. So I want to talk a little bit about this. The deployment pipeline is the process of moving from business idea all the way to the customer, and was originally documented by Jez Humboldt and David Farley in their book of Continuous Delivery. The deployment pipeline really is the basic construct of DevOps. And so let's center some of our discussion around this. Now, every enterprise today, IT organization, currently has a software process in place to build and deliver software to their customers. This is their current deployment pipeline. In fact, large enterprises have many deployment pipelines, and that's key. And so when you look at how do you scale and what is the goal of enterprise DevOps, the goal of enterprise DevOps first is to document, prioritize, and optimize your existing pipelines. And we're going to parse these words in a bit, create new pipelines where needed, and then seek efficiencies to deliver better business outcomes. So you already have something in place that you are using to get code for your organization from idea to production, your current deployment pipeline. What you need to do is you need to document all the ways you deliver software today. And so everyone has a common view, because when you get into optimizing it, you want to get everyone aligned to the organization. So you need to assess the way you're currently delivering your software today. And a key tool is a lean process called value stream mapping is one method that allows you to trace the flow, the process flow and the artifact flow, identifying lead times, and constraints and waste. And so you need to do an analysis of how you currently deliver software today. And by documenting and prioritizing your deployment pipelines, everyone will understand what processes are being changed at any one time and how they should start working differently. So ultimately, it's about, in this case, making work visible. Okay. I find very few customers have that documentation completely up to date. So it's a great exercise that you learn a lot just from doing that. Now, I mentioned that there are many ways that typically large enterprises deliver software, whether they're deploying from the mainframe or mobile or the cloud or on-prem. These are different instances of deployment pipelines. Now, let's take a look at sort of an example. So here's an example of some enterprise deployment pipelines. They range from loosely coupled mobile apps to tightly coupled back office apps. Each of these pipelines tend to have different attributes, right? So you have to take a system thinking kind of approach to understand what you're going to focus on first, because there's going to be a lot of work here. And so if you look at, let's say, your mobile apps, it's a loosely coupled infrastructure, leveraging cloud and IoT devices. Maybe it's a high growth business, solution with lots of changes, and you need more resources. So you have that end of the spectrum. You might be also developing new core apps, again, built and in a loosely coupled infrastructure. Maybe you're doing a web service backend or a REST call to the mainframe to get some information from the database on the mainframe. And this is sort of a high growth kind of application. And again, you're growing, you're needing more resources. Then really sort of on the back end of the legacy end, you might have also legacy core apps that are tightly coupled infrastructure. Maybe you're doing agile transformation, moving from waterfall to agile. Maybe you're moving teams over to agile. This might be where your existing large revenue stream is. Maybe there's a moderate amount of change, but very high costs, a lot of hardware costs, a lot of infrastructure costs. So you have to make decisions on where you're going to focus on first. Now, a lot of people would look at this and say, okay, well, what we're going to do is we're going to take the tightly coupled infrastructure pipelines off the table. We're just going to focus on optimizing the high growth pipelines. Now, while that's a good, one way to look at it is sort of the bimodal approach. It's not necessarily the best way, because again, ultimately, you have to look at what your business objectives are. If your business objectives are to recapture value for innovation, maybe you have a fixed IT budget and you need to actually recapture resources and gain more resources so you can redeploy those resources to your high growth pipelines, you want to look at your legacy pipelines, because there you can do cost optimizations and drive a lot of efficiencies out of those pipelines. There's a lot of waste, and you can recapture that and then redeploy it into your high growth pipelines. So once you understand, and based on your business objectives, that will help drive your strategy on where you're going to optimize, what pipelines you're going to focus on. And then within each pipeline, then it comes down to where are you going to optimize? And again, your value stream mapping exercise will be a key guide to where you're going to focus on. There's sort of two ways to look at it. You can look at it through just lead times and waste, or you can look at it on cost. Where are we spending the most money? And if we optimized cost could, in recaptured cost value in hard ROI, could we redeploy that into our high growth apps? A lot of time, of course, is spent waiting. A lot of manual effort in test and deploy. That's a prime area in provisioning where most customers sort of start. Also, building, the wrong solution is the biggest waste in software development. So and a lot is happening there. Microsoft did a survey a couple of years back saying that, and they came up with the conclusion that 50% of all features aren't being used. So there's lots of opportunity here. These are some common places where to start. Automation, of course, has been a big boon to organizations where with more automated work, teams free their technical staff to do innovative work that adds real value to their organizations. So remember, one of the objectives, a lot of times you might have a fixed budget. So where you can recapture value from your organization and redeploy it to value creation is a big win. So automation is very important. Now, Micro Focus is uniquely positioned to support enterprise DevOps. We alone really have the capabilities to assess and prioritize and optimize all your deployment pipelines in your hybrid IT environment from mainframe to mobile. Our unique breadth and depth of our solutions and our expertise in building and operating and securing software enables our customers to deliver on the promise of DevOps. We do this really by enabling enterprises to deliver better business outcomes, helping enterprises build, operate, and secure every aspect of the technology value stream, leveraging new technology while building on what already works. And here's a couple of examples that we did. We look at Convergence, is a composites manufacturing company. They had their main challenge that they highlighted was poor quality and high costs, with developers having to dedicate time to support manual testing efforts. This is a very common use case. And they used our solutions to develop an automated test suite. And they were able to recapture 15% development productivity improvement over time. And that's big. So if you have, let's say, 100 developers, and let's say your fully burdened cost is $100K per developer, it's basically recapturing $1.5 million of innovation a year, or 15 developers. So that was a big win for this company. Next company is Generali, France. Automated its application delivery process. Its challenge was struggling with manually lengthy deployments in a very complex environment. And so what they chose to use with implementing a continuous delivery system across different environments, leveraging our application release automation solutions. And they had a 90% reduction in time it takes to put changes in production. And furthermore, they were able to cut their weekend work by 50%. And ideally, with the right architecture and the right solutions, you shouldn't have to work any weekends. That should be a goal of every IT delivery team. And finally, we have this major global insurer who employs more than 15,000 people, writes 8 billion plus of premiums per year. They had a very interesting challenge. They had a 3-tier environment consisting of COBOL on a front end and web apps in the mid-tier. And there are different platforms ranging from Windows to mainframe. Each environment each of these 8 environments costs $3 million per year to support and maintain. And we helped them create this automated test and provisioning system that basically rehosted their apps, mainframe apps, into AWS in the cloud for their test environments. They also built a continuous integration solution that supports all tiers of the 3-tiered solution from mainframe to the front end. And they're able to reduce their annual costs from $3 million per environment to $120K per environment. They reduced their provisioning time from 6 weeks to 2 hours, and were able to triple the number of major releases per year. So DevOps, with DevOps practices, it delivers results. And it really is a great enabler to support your DevOps journey. But scaling DevOps in large organizations is a journey, right? It's not simple. Most companies that I see get up on stage and talk about their DevOps journey in conferences like the Enterprise DevOps Summit have been on this journey for a couple of years. And they all sort of talk about this J-curve effect, where they get these early wins, maybe with automation, you get some quick automation, and then there's some hard problems to solve. And typically a lot of that is around the culturally and organizational issues that you have to transform in order to implement more DevOps practices. But I think what's key really to understand and sort of as a framework is, one, to make sure that everyone understands the business objectives, to be willing to change the system, to change the culture, right? And then to assess and document and prioritize and optimize your deployment pipelines to seek better efficiencies to deliver better business outcomes. And I want to talk about business outcomes are different from measuring outputs. Outcomes are the results and the effects of the outputs that you provide. So it's very important to include business metrics to measure these outcomes. With that, Micro Focus supports can help you and support your DevOps practices at enterprise scale. You can go to this link here, www.microfocus.com/enterprise DevOps for more information. And with that, I want to thank you, and I'm more than happy to take any questions through the chat panel. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions? So one question is about this concept of what outputs versus outcomes. I think we should sort of delineate and discuss that briefly. Outputs are measuring IT's work, let's say. So change fail rates, right? That's output. How fast? How many deployments? Those are always good. Those are good, and they help you measure the performance of your organization. But it's back to that thing, that assertion I made earlier, that just because you're going fast and with good quality doesn't necessarily mean the business is going to take off. You have to measure the outcomes of your output, such as customer experience metrics. Okay, maybe implementing a net promoter score periodically as well to understand trends in customer sat. Business metrics as well. Maybe it could be, and you can help correlate that through renewals or subscriptions or something that helps when you implement a change. Prior to implementing it, you need to understand what metrics you can use to validate that change was indeed successful. And that's very, very important. That was a good question. Any other questions? If not, then I'll bid everybody a good Friday, and I want to wish everyone a happy holiday. My email address and Twitter handle is right there on the screen, so please, if you have any follow-up questions or comments or feedback, please let me know. And I wish everyone a great day. Thank you.